Return of the off season means return of mock drafts. And in this one, we're doing a 7-round on this mock draft Monday. That's coming up on today's episode of Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome inside today's episode of Locked On Commanders. I am your host, David Harrison, here with you Monday through Friday. Also, your friend on the ground covering the Washington Commanders for Sports Illustrated's CommanderGameDay.com, helping out with WUSA 9's local coverage of the team as well. And I want to thank you for coming through today. In this episode, we are going to go through a 7-round mock draft Monday. Every day, as you might be confused, why am I doing a 7-rounder? I'll explain as we get into it. But on day 3, we're looking for depth. Day 2, we're looking to fill some needs. And on day 1, we're going to secure Mikey Sainristil's spot on the roster as far as where he's going to line up. I want to thank you for coming through today. Everydayers, those of you who come through every day, I already know you're subscribed, but if you're not an everydayer yet, be sure to subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you are listening to this episode right now. And if you're new to the show, thanks for giving it a try. Locked On Commanders is your daily podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So be sure to come back every single day. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Terms and conditions apply. We thank them for being today's title sponsor. It's a 7-round mock draft Monday, and everydayers, you already know things are a little bit wonky because I told you I don't do more than 3 rounds of mock drafting until we get compensatory picks. So why am I doing a 7-round draft pick right now? Well, because of our good buddy Lance Zierlein over at NFL.com. Lance Zierlein has been covering the NFL draft for a very long time. He's gotten pretty good at narrowing down, not to an exact number, but at least to a reliable number that we can at least play around with, how many compensatory picks will be issued by which teams, or to which teams, I should say, by which round. So we're going to trust Lance Zierlein's numbers, at least in the aspect that it allows us to do a full 7-round experiment. And Lance Zierlein over at NFL.com, he projects that there will be 5 compensatory picks awarded in the 3rd round, 4 compensatory picks in the 4th, 8 in the 5th, 5 in the 6th, 8 more in the 7th. And if you don't know, compensatory picks get added to the end of each round. So after all 32 teams or all 32 picks are made in the 3rd round, those 5 compensatory picks would then be added at the end of that before we restart for the 4th round at the top of the order. So that means the Washington Commanders would have picks 29, 61, 79, 156, and 269 once you adjust for the compensatory picks in there. And starting this off right off the bat, let's just get to the picks. Round 1, number 29. The way that I really looked at this is I looked at the top 5 prospects using the Pro Football Focus big board because I have not, and I probably will not study enough of these prospects to have a big board of my own. I feel like if you're going to have a big board, you got to have at least 250 players in that bad boy. I mean, look, we look at this. The Washington Commanders have pick number 269. So if you don't have a big board that can account for at least 90% of these draft selections, not even all the picks that are going to be made, but the selections, in my opinion, and that's just my opinion, you don't have a big board. You just got a list of dudes. You know what I mean? Like if you scouted 20 players, it's not a big board. It's a list of guys. Okay. And it's okay. But I'm just letting you know, I use PFF's big board right now. We'll go over some big boards during the regular or the course of the off season, and we'll use some other people's information as well. But for right now, we're using PFF's big board. So the top 5 prospects when we get on the clock selecting as the Washington Commanders are running back Amarian Hampton out of North Carolina, offensive tackle Josh Connerly Jr. out of Oregon, cornerback Jahdae Baron out of Texas, tight end Colston Loveland out of Michigan, linebacker Demetrius Knight Jr. out of South Carolina. This one's a pretty easy pick for me. I go immediately to cornerback Jahdae Baron out of Texas, 5'11", 200-pound slot corner. Played in the slot pretty much almost exclusively in 2022 and 2023. Did play inside last year as well, 2024, but also played outside, so showing some good versatility. He's at a 6.35 grade right now by NFL.com's Lance Zierlein. That projects to be an eventual plus starter on Lance Zierlein's scale. Lance comps him to Tampa Bay Buccaneers cornerback Tyreek Smith, who played primarily in the slot for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this season. So all of that really kind of tracks. And Lance in his profile, which of course you can read on your own, but I'll give you kind of the highlights, right? And Lance highlights Jahdae's footwork, his play strength, but also says he lacks a little bit of recovery speed when going deep. And when he gets beat deep, he doesn't necessarily have the ability to recover, which leads to him being a little bit grabby. We've seen that with Noah Igbenogany here a little bit, so that's not something that's completely new for the Washington Commanders secondary in this space. I went ahead and looked at Bleacher Report's Corey Giddings as well. He did a draft scout or a scout profile on Barron and says and calls him a force in the run game, which you already know is going to make Joe Jr. happy, and it's probably music to your ears as well. Highlights his aggressive nature, allows him to play bigger than he is. Again, remember, he's not the biggest dude in the world, 5'11", 200 pounds, right? Good size, but not, the biggest, imposing force out there on the field. So it's good to hear that he's a guy that can play bigger than he actually is. Reminds you of that Mikey Sainristil energy. Spent 5 years at Texas, so he meets the desirable experience level that Adam Peters seems to covet, at least a little bit. Also played receiver and returned punts in high school. So, not the same as coming to Michigan like Mikey did as a receiver, converting to corner, but he does have that receiver background as well. And I think not the most important part, but one of the most important parts of this, he allows the Washington Commanders to keep Mikey Sainristil outside, opposite of Marshawn Lattimore, who you hope is going to come in the next season healthier, have a full training camp, full training period to really ramp up with the defense instead of trying to join a defense that's already in stride. And if Lattimore doesn't pan out for some reason, I know there are some Commanders fans who are already kind of disenchanted with the entire trade experience and are already kind of saying he's getting paid way too much next year. Go ahead and just let him go. I don't see that happening, but if for some reason it doesn't work out with Lattimore during next season or even after next season, Barron has that experience outside and may be able to transition into that position like Mikey Sainristil did, open up the door to potentially bring in a different slot corner in the next draft or free agency. Would still recommend, in my opinion, bringing back Noah Igbenogany, the slot defender this year after Mikey Sainristil made the shift outside. So you're not forcing Barron on the field prematurely. Give him the opportunity to grow naturally, give him the opportunity to grow without pressure, give him that buffer in case the team does need to ease him in, or if you need to move on off of Marshawn Lattimore, even if it's just for an injury, you may not even want to move on from him for a play standpoint. Even if it's just an injury situation, you have the ability to bring Noah Igbenogany back up into the starting lineup, and you can move Barron outside potentially as well. Obviously, free agency is going to make a big impact on all of these picks as we go through, which is why it's fun to kind of have these exercises as we go. Right now, I'm just kind of looking at the roster as it stands today for 2025, and still a lot of work to be done by Adam Peters and his staff on that roster. So that's my first pick. I kind of look at that nickel corner. Noah Igbenogany's not under contract for 2025. There's nobody on the roster outside of Mikey Sainristil and Quan Martin that could potentially take that spot. Both of those guys are already serving and playing in very key starting roles, so you don't want to have to move either of those guys, in my opinion, into the slot and open up a hole somewhere else. So that's our number one pick, Jahdae Barron out of Texas. We're going to get into the rest of our mock draft. Day 2 coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you in part by LinkedIn. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. Well, that's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clocked out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. LinkedIn's new feature can help you write a job description and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip. Add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture to double your reach to qualified candidates. No wonder 72% of small businesses say that LinkedIn helps them find high quality hires. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Again, that's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Don't forget about adding the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture to double your reach. Terms and conditions apply. Day 1 of our 2025 7-round mock draft, our first 7-round mock draft of the offseason in the books. We've got Jahdae Baron, cornerback out of Texas, on the 2025 roster. Now let's get into day 2. But before we do that, if you want to get more out of the Locked On Commanders podcast, sign up to be a Locked On Commanders insider today. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. And from there, you're going to get text messages directly from me. I know we're in the offseason, but I'm about to go to the Super Bowl, about to go to the scouting combine at the end of February. We got league meetings in March, right into the NFL draft, and all kinds of stuff in between, signings and press conferences and all kinds of fun. So make sure you're sticking around there. And if you want to get in on that action, join subtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. And you also get access to our insider-only Zoom conferences where we get together on Zoom just have a good time, man. Talking Commanders football. Sometimes we talk about other football. Sometimes we just talk about life in general. So it's a good time. Make sure you come through for it. Join subtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. You get the first 2 weeks free to check it out and try it out. Going on to day 2 of our 7-round mock draft. Second round, third round, we do have a pick in each of these rounds, 61 and 79 overall, not impacted yet by these compensatory picks. We'll get to that again here as we get into day 3. But when we get to the 61st overall pick, on the PFF big board, again, our top 5 prospects are defensive lineman Omar Norman Lott out of Tennessee, wide receiver Jayden Higgins out of Iowa State, offensive tackle Cameron Williams out of Texas, offensive tackle Ozzie Trapilo out of Boston College, and offensive tackle Wyatt Millam out of West Virginia. Battle of the offensive tackles is what it would kind of look like, right? We have 3 of our 5 top prospects are OTs. If John Allen and Deron Payne are still on the roster, which they are right now, then it's not going to be another defensive tackle. So automatically we're going to remove Omar Norman Lott from Tennessee off of this list just because we do have John Allen, we do have Deron Payne, we do have Johnny Newton taking another D tackle in the second round, just a little too rich for my blood here right now. Jayden Higgins, the wide receiver out of Iowa State, is interesting, but I want to make this pick between him and the best offensive tackle in the 3 that are available. When you look at the grades, and this is why you got to get past the stat boxes, right? When you look at the grades, Millam out of West Virginia, Wyatt Millam out of West Virginia has the best overall PFF grade. He's at the best run blocking grade, and he's at the best pass blocking grade of all 3 of those tackles. So why is he the 3rd best on that top 5? And why is he the one we're not going to draft or even consider right now? Because while he is all of those things, he also has really short arms. And Bleacher Report's Brandon Thorne is just one of several people projecting him to play guard or inside, I should say, in the National Football League. And that is not what we're looking to draft here at the 61st overall pick, is a guard or a center. So if we go back to Cameron Williams of Texas, we go back to Ozzie Trapilo of Boston College. Williams is the better run blocker. Trapilo is the better pass blocker. Williams has only started 1 year at Texas, and he's got some mechanical flaws, quite honestly, in his game that may not have mattered in college because he can make up for it with elite athleticism and strength, but it certainly could matter in the National Football League. And we're not going to diagnose the whole conversation of the NFL's inability to develop offensive linemen during the season, but there's a problem there. Let's just put it that way. So you don't want to draft a guy that's, especially in the second round, that comes with a lot of things that you need to fix. Now you still have Andrew Wiley on the roster. So if you need to have a vet start while the young guy develops, kind of like Cornelius Lucas and Brandon Coleman did, you could do that. But do you really want to spend a top 65 pick on a guy that you're not sure of? I don't. Now, you look at Trapilo, redshirted in 2020, played in 10 games with 2 starts in 21, 10 starts in 22, 12 starts in 23, 12 starts in 24. That's a lot of experience. Last 2 years, all 24 starts came at right tackle. He was also a team captain. So I've settled on Trapilo here. Trapilo is my favorite tackle here on the board, looking at just the 2 prospects, but also trying to kind of put myself in the shoes like Adam Peters in this whole process, right? And when I look at him and I look at Iowa State receiver Jayden Higgins, now Jayden Higgins is 6'4", 215 pounds. He's a senior. Looking at Dame Parsons' profile on Bleacher Report, also Dame Parson, one of the hosts of the Locked On NFL Draft podcast, so make sure you're checking that out this draft season. Parson has him as a 4th-round guy, so he's not really all that high on Higgins right now. Drafting him here would bring a lot of number 2 expectations, right? And it doesn't seem that he might fit the bill right away, according to Damian. Now, Damian did praise his contested catch ability, football IQ, but also says he kind of lacks that athletic wow factor. He's only an average blocker. That don't necessarily fit well, but as a receiver, you just need more effort than you need anything else. So I wanted to see him for myself. So I went and saw his Senior Bowl tape, and I came away, honestly, more impressed than Parson is with this prospect right now. I thought he worked really well for his size, won a lot of his routes, and proved to be a popular target for the quarterbacks down in Mobile. Now, again, I haven't watched as much tape on him as Parson did, so certainly there's a grain of salt to be there. I also like the story that he's had to grind to get everything that he's ever had in college football. He's a 2-star recruit that played 2 years at FCS Eastern Kentucky before transferring to Iowa State. In 2023, he had 23 starts at Iowa State, over 2,000 yards receiving in 2 years, 15 touchdowns as well. So the production is good. So it's hard for me to pick here, but I am going to go with Higgins because I still have Wiley. I know he's not an all-pro, but the offensive line wasn't as big an issue as some other areas. And I think that in order for Jayden Daniels to have a successful second season, remember, now every defensive coordinator he plays against next year is going to have a full year of tape, and these guys know that he's coming, right? Like, Brian Schottenheimer and his staff, the Dallas Cowboys, they know that Jayden Daniels is coming. So do the other teams. I haven't seen him yet, but I've seen other guys go up against him. So I need to give my quarterback some weapons. I need to give him what he needs to be successful in his second season. And yes, upgrading at tackle would be nice, but having a good offensive line and upgrading the weapons could be even better. So I'm happy with Andrew Wiley right now if I need to, but it was a really hard decision. I'll tell you that. I did go back and forth on it. So Jayden Higgins, Iowa State, he is our second round draft pick. Third round pick number 79. We come back on the clock. Our top 5 prospects are defensive lineman Alfred Collins out of Texas, tight end Elijah Arroyo out of Miami, Florida, the Hurricanes, offensive tackle Marcus Mbao out of Purdue, wide receiver Isaiah Bond out of Texas, offensive tackle Charles Grant out of William and Mary. So right off the bat, I want to look at Isaiah Bond out of Texas because I'm like, okay, did I draft a receiver in the second round? Now here in the third round, I got a receiver just as good, if not better. And I look at Isaiah Bond, not a bad player, but not the type of player I'm looking at to add a receiver to this roster. So immediately I'm like, no buyer's remorse there. Texas defensive lineman Alfred Collins is a run stopper. He's not a pass rusher, but that's kind of what we need here, right? Especially to pair with Johnny Newton down the road. Like you kind of look at who's the next John Allen, Deron Payne combo. Johnny Newton and Alfred Collins, with his upside could potentially be that guy. Miami tight end Elijah Arroyo is interesting. Doesn't have a long track record of actually being productive, so that kind of gives me pause. And between the tackles, I think William and Mary's Charles Grant fits the bill for what the Commanders are looking for more because Mbao is projected to go inside to guard as well. So Grant didn't attend the Senior Bowl this week, which is a little bit of a worry for me. I'm not going to be honest with you. I'm going to be honest with you. Not really sure why he didn't attend. That's why it's a little bit troublesome, but I really wanted to see his tape there because he gets really high. Like his leverage point is really, he gets stood up a lot in his college tape, is able to hold his ground. But in the National Football League, you stood up like that, you're going to topple and you're going to get knocked over into your quarterback's knees. And that is not where we want you as an offensive tackle. So more because I haven't done enough work on Grant to really have a lot of confidence on him. Again, the other guy's a guard. I'm going here with Alfred Collins, defensive lineman out of Texas. We're going to take another defensive tackle. And the good news here is Lance Zierlein on his NFL.com draft profile quoted an NFC personnel director as saying, quote, he's a legit specimen. With the right coaching, he could end up taking off and becoming the best interior player in the class, end quote. So we've been praising Dan Quinn's coaching staff. It's time for Daryl Tapp. It's time for all those guys to kind of put their stamp on a kid like this and make him hit his ceiling there. With our first 3 picks then, we've got cornerback Jahdae Baron out of Texas, wide receiver Jayden Higgins out of Iowa State, defensive lineman Alfred Collins out of Texas. And yes, if you're watching on YouTube, you see Ohio State helmets behind me, so you know I'm not a Longhorn fan, which means I just genuinely like these prospects. What about day 3? We're looking for some depth, and we found it. We're going to come back and do that right now on Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you in part by Prize Picks. The big game is almost here, and there's no better way to make it even more exciting than with Prize Picks, the best daily fantasy sports place for you to place your money. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings awarded, Prize Picks makes it fun and simple to get in on the action. If you haven't played before, here's how it works. You pick more or less on at least 2 player stat projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your money. Prize Picks even has a free pick for the big game where Patrick Mahomes only needs to throw for 1 yard to win you a selection. Pair that with one more correct pick, and you're already cashing out. So check out the promos tab to tail any of the super sweet Millie winners big game lineups. If you tail a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you can win a split of $1 million in promo funds. So download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL, and you'll get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Today's episode of Locked On Commanders is also brought to you in part by Game Time. Looking for tickets to your next big event? Maybe last-minute tickets to the big game next week? Whether it's a concert, a comedy show, or a sports game, finding the right ticket at the right price can be a headache. But with Game Time Picks, it's never been easier. Let me tell you how it works. With Game Time Picks, the app does all the hard work for you. It curates the best deals, so you don't have to waste time searching through endless ticket listings. I've been using Game Time Picks for a while now, and here's why I love it. Because simply, the curated deals make it simple to find great tickets at a great price. No more sifting through thousands of options. And the seat view feature is a game changer. Before I even hit buy, I can see exactly what my seat will look like in the venue. Incredibly reassuring. Ready to make your next event even better? Download the Game Time app, create your account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. There are terms that apply. So again, that code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Wrapping up this mock draft Monday episode, 7 rounds to get us started. I say started. We've already done one mock draft Monday, but I say started. We're going to do it. We're fully into the offseason this week is what I'm saying. So day 3 of our mock draft here. We've got to skip the first 9 prospects when we come back up. So we're skipping guys like running back Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt from Arizona, tight end Ben Yurosek out of Georgia, and edge RJ Oben out of Notre Dame. Certainly some good talented guys, but again, trying to account for the projected amount of compensatory picks per round, we've got to shift ourselves down, and that leaves us with our top 5 prospects available as tight end Jackson Hawes out of Georgia Tech, center Seth McLaughlin out of Ohio State, guard Connor Colby out of Iowa, tight end Thomas Fedone II out of Nebraska, guard Tyler Cooper out of Minnesota. I added an extra O, so it's Cooper out of Minnesota. Of the top 2 tight ends, Jackson Hawes is a 6-year senior from Georgia Tech, is probably the better of the 2, certainly has more experience, more of a blocker than a receiver. Again, I turned on the Senior Bowl tape. Looks very John Bates-like. So if John Bates is back, don't really have a need for him, right? But if John Bates isn't back, then perhaps you go out here and this is where you grab a guy like Jackson Hawes. But I'm really intrigued by center Seth McLaughlin out of Ohio State. Really interesting because he did suffer an injury, but without that injury, he's a day 2 guy, no doubt in my mind about it. So to get him late in the 5th here, I think is a steal once he's healthy. If you're the Washington Commanders, this team has already shown you they're not necessarily overly concerned with the boom, immediate impact and splash. They're definitely okay taking a chance on a guy that may not be able to immediately be available, but when he is, could potentially make a big impact. So again, to get him late in the 5th would be really cool. He could play guard. He's also obviously got center experience. He played center at Ohio State and Alabama before that. So I think we're going to roll the dice here a little bit. It's day 3, right? We didn't have a 4th round pick. And in some ways, you could say not having the 4th round pick means you need to nail the 5th round pick. But in some ways, I look at the day 3 and like, you know what, man, if you're going to gamble, bro, day 3 is the day to do it. So you're getting a day 3 guy with day 2 upside. We're going to take center Seth McLaughlin out of Ohio State here in the 5th round. Now we're moving all the way to the 7th round, number 269. And I'm already praying that Adam Peters has some trades up his sleeve so I don't got to sit in Ashburn waiting from the 5th to the 7th round because woof, that is going to be a long day for me, buddy. I'll tell you right now. Top 5 prospects available at 269. Offensive tackle Trey Wettig out of Indiana. Center safety Shiloh Sanders out of Colorado. Offensive tackle Carson Vincent out of Alabama A&M. Linebacker David Gabenda out of Texas. Safety DeRicky Wright out of Vanderbilt in the pick here. Offensive tackle Trey Wettig out of Indiana. Started in 2022 in Indiana after Wisconsin after redshirting in 2020 and playing rotationally in 2021. So he's been starting since 2022. Transferred to Indiana in 2023. So clearly, in this scenario, Andrew Wiley or some other veteran is going to be playing right tackle for the Washington Commanders. Could be a free agent. We're not doing that right here on this episode. But that may be where somebody might say, well, let's go back and get that OT and in the 2nd round instead of the receiver. Look for a receiver later. But I'm not going to do that here. No revisionist history. The picks are what the picks are. I'm not going to change them just to make the episode sound better, to make me sound smarter to some people. Those are the picks I'm going with because that's the pick that I made, and that's the way it works. You can't turn in the card and then change the card later when you go oopsie daisy, which I'm not even actually doing, to be quite honest with you. I just know some people are going to hear this and want me to do that. But I'm going to do what I do with everybody. I'm going to take my experience from this mock. We're going to continue to fold it over. But for this week's mock draft, we have 1st round pick number 29, cornerback Jahdae Baron out of Texas. 2nd round wide receiver Jayden Higgins out of Iowa State. And who doesn't want a Jayden to Jayden touchdown connection, right? 3rd round defensive lineman Alfred Collins out of Texas. 5th round offensive lineman Seth McLaughlin out of Ohio State. 7th round offensive tackle Trey Wettig out of Indiana. The only grade that PFF gave us below a B+ was for McLaughlin, which we know we're rolling the dice on him, but that grade gets better if it's at pick 156, which it actually is, instead of PFF, who says it's 147, which it actually wasn't. PFF also said they would recommend that we go offensive tackle Josh Connerly Jr. out of Oregon over Jahdae Baron in the 1st round. I get it. It's tackle. Certainly there's going to be some of you out there who agree with PFF. Not going to do 7-rounders all the time because, like I said, it's not a completely accurate exercise until the compensatory picks are announced, but it was fun to get one in there right away. Who knows? By the time we hit our next mock draft Monday, we might have a little bit of news about what's going on in this roster that'll change things just a little bit. But in the meantime, we've got the week started here. Next time you see me, I will have something New Orleans behind me. I'll be sitting somewhere in New Orleans. I don't know where I'll be when I do this show, but I will be somewhere in New Orleans. In the meantime, If you have questions or comments, all you got to do is text me. To do that, all you got to do is go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. For your next listen, please check out the Locked On NFL podcast. Tyler Rowland is kicking you off in the morning. Tony Wiggins is bringing you back down in the afternoon for some real NFL talk. Not down as in sad, down as in direct, like less hot takey, I should say. It's the all-new Locked On NFL, and it's twice per day. As always, thank you so much for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, every dayers. Thanks for coming through every day. If you're out and about, please be safe, be kind, and I will see you next time live from New Orleans. I don't know why I said live. We might be live. We may not be live. Either way, I'll be in New Orleans for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.